All right. Good morning. We are on today's F is Pay Gimel 83. I believe we're about 12 lines up from the bottom on 82B. And we are discussing so the Mishnah was talking about it mentioned Kohen Shishimesh Betuma. Second. Okay. So Bami Nerabacha Baruch Huna Meir of Sheshes. Ravacha asked Rav Sheshes. Kohen Shishimesh Betuma. The Kohen who did the avoda, but he was tame. Chayav misa, we know that's not permitted, but chayav misa b'dei shamayim, ein chayav misa b'dei shamayim. Does he get the punishment of death through the hands of God? In other words, not through the court, but he is liable to death, but not through the court. Amalei Nisu, I said we have a Mishnah, our Mishnah. Kohen sheshimesh v'tuma. Our Mishnah said a Kohen who did the avoda while tame. Ein echad hakohanim mevin osel lebesim. You don't bring him to court. Ela pirchei kula motzin osel chutz la'azara u'postin esmocho b'gzirin. But basically, they took him out of the Beis Hamikdash and they beat him to death. Right? V'isal kadata m'chayv b'dei shamayim. If you want to say that he's chayv misa b'dei shamayim, then lish b'kei delishno b'dei shamayim. So what are you doing it for? Like let God take care of it. If the punishment is he's going to be killed by God, then what do you have to get involved? Elamai Enachai Ravacha says, so what do you want to say? That he's not Chayv Misvidei Shemaim, Mika Mide Drachmana Patre Vanan Nekum Veniktale. Is there something where is there a situation where the Torah says he's off the hook from death, and so we go ahead and kill him? Like that, like what's the source for being able to execute him that way? Extrajudicially. Velos, the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Do you think there's no case like that? That's none. Misha Laka Vashana, we had yesterday, we had the Mishnah. Somebody who repeated an offense of Malchus, basically Machnisin Kippah, then you basically lock him up until he dies. Rahmana Patre Vanan Katlina. So here's the case where Rahmana Patre, where the Torah says there's no judicial punishment, and we go ahead and kill him anyway. So you could say the same thing here with the coin. You that there is a case where you can say that you can administer this extrajudicial death penalty. So my answer is Hama Rabbi Yirmiyah Marish Lakish, but Rabbi said about that, the Malchus shall Krisus Askinan to govern Barkatalahu. No, that our Mishnah from yesterday was talking about not just any case of Malchus, not just any case where he repeated an offense, but it was something for which he would be chayav kares if it could be proved that he did it deliberately and with hasra and everything. Um, uh, or not with hasra, but if it was something that he is subject to the death penalty anyway through kares. Okay, so we do have a case like that. Vaha gonev hakaspa. What about yesterday's Mishnah? If you steal kaspa, which we said was the klei shares, then that's one of the things for which he can be killed extrajudicially. Ravida says no. That is we're talking about klei sharis or mizan. There is a hint in the Torah. Lo yavo lirot k'nolas hakodesh v'mesu. In discussing like the role of the Levim and the Kohanim, it says like if they come and see uh, the desecration of the Kodesh, then they could be subject to death. So that's an indication, or at least some indication, that there is a death penalty. This is kind of a death penalty thing. So even though we don't administer it judicially, that's the source for being able to administer it extrajudicially. Same. What about the third case in the Mishnah? Someone who commits blasphemy through magic. So again, here's a case where you can kill someone extrajudicially, even though he's not liable to the death penalty. Rabbi Yosef, so we answer that actually he is. It is a case where he is subject to the death penalty of kares because Rabbi Yosef interpreted this as we say, so yake kosmos kosmo. What he's saying is let this magical force strike down Cosmo, the one that gave it the powers like God. So the Machzekim Baruch Hashem, it's like cursing God, and cursing God is a kares type of offense, and therefore, since the person is subject to death, we can say that we can kill him extrajudicially. Baha Bo Sakusis, what about the last case in the Mishnah of Baal Aramis is actually what I think is what the Mishnah said. Um, you can kill someone extrajudicially for that. We had we dealt with that yesterday. Basically, we had a pasuk that indicated the adkare Rav Ligamare. Rav was reminded of what he said, that this is it's indicated in that pasuk that kares applies. So in all these cases, kares applies, and that's why you can kill someone extrajudicially,
Wasn't there a
because he's already
case,
subject to the death.
wasn't there a case about, I don't know, let's say a month ago, a strange case where Shimon ben Chertach, I think, when there were 80,
Yeah,
80 Shafot, and he said he brought his students in there, and he said he picked them up off the ground because these women don't have any power if they're standing. So he picked them up, brought them out of the house, and they beat them outside. They beat them all up and killed them all outside the house where he found all these women. The whole story there. Oh,
yeah,
it's around Daf. Uh,
yeah.
44, 45,
So you're
something
asking
like
where
that.
did he get the authority to do that?
No, I think that would be another example
Oh,
of
another
the
example.
cases where they could kill people that if Beit
Well,
Din
not
did
through the
or
court proceedings.
right,
Yeah,
exactly that
yeah,
was
yeah.
around Daf for Arbin Arba, something like that, 44,
Hmm.
45, something like that.
Yeah, interesting. I've actually been reading some of the background to that, historical studies of what was going on in that time period, and it was pretty brutal. I mean, the everything having to do with Herod and his whole family, his sons and his wives and everything. I mean, these people were really pathological. You know, I mean, it's just unimaginable the massacres that were carried out in general at that time, and not just in Israel, but the Romans, the Greeks. I mean, they were pretty bloodthirsty when it came to power struggles. Okay,
Where are you reading that?
I am reading a book called Jerusalem. It's a history of Yerushalayim by Simon Sebag Montefiore. It's not from traditional sources. A lot of it, I think, is from that time period, is from Josephus.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it's pretty riveting, actually. Um, okay. Okay, so anyway, so what we end up is that Rosh Hashanah holds that a Kohen who does the avodah in Tuma while the Kohen is Tameh, he's not subject to the death penalty. So Esvei, so they ask about that. And so here's a brisa, which we will analyze in detail as soon as we get the essential point from it that we want. So it's talking about doing all of these avodas outside of the mikdash. So all these things have to do with the mincha. Hayotzek, you pour the oil on the flour. Habolel, or you mix it. Haposes, you break it into pieces. Hamoleach, you salt it. Meni, if you wave it. Magish, you bring it to the mizbeach. Masanis, shulchan, puts the bread on the table. Metiv haneros, or you prepare the lamps of the menorah. Hakomets, or you take the komets of flour from the mincha. Hamakabel damim. All these are essential parts of the uh, of the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Bachutz, if you do any of these things outside of the Mikdash, Potter, you're off the hook. Vein chayavim alayim. Um, and there's you also don't have if you do it outside the base of Mikdash, there's no problem with zar. Lo mishum zarus, if you're not a Kohen and you do it outside the Mikdash, you're also off the hook. Lo mishum tuma, doesn't matter if you're tamei. Lo mishum mechusar begadim, if you're not wearing the right number of clothes of a Kohen. Lo mishum rufutilayim raglayim, and you didn't wash your hands and your feet, you're off the hook because it's not a real avodah. You did it outside the Mikdash. Makater chayav. So wait a minute. So what's missing from this? Somebody who actually burns the incense. Um, is not listed among these things for which you're potter. So we deduce that if you actually burn the incense outside of the mikdash, you're chayav. My love, Misa. So what are you chayav? What's your liability? Wouldn't it be death? Because most things where you do the avodah wrong is death penalty. The Gemara says, "Lo, basar, not necessarily. You have no proof of that. Maybe the inference, you can't infer more than you can infer. You can infer that mekater is chayav, that if you burn the incense outside of the mikdash, you're chayav. But what are you chayav? It's not clear. So maybe you're chayav just for a regular lav. Elazar, nami lazar. So Gemara says, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? We're talking about we said that if you're a zar, if you're a non-Kohen, you're off the hook, and you want to say that you're off the hook for a asar, for a regular lav. Vaksiv azar karev you must. But wait, the Torah says specifically that if you have a case of a non-Kohen doing the avodah, then there's a death penalty. So if about a zar, the Mishnah is talking about a death penalty. So we should apply that also to doing the avodah while tamei, right? Which is also in this list. That's against Rosh Hashanah. So how can you say Kadisa? No, not necessarily. Maybe these are all a list of all things that you are potter from, but they could have different punishments if you did them in the mikdash. They could have different punishments. Um, some could be kari, some could be regular lav. So Gemara says, "Miklal diyosuk bola lav namelo." So that means that some of the things mentioned in this brisa, pouring the oil, mixing the flour, does that mean it's not even a lav? Tanya. As Harley Yotzuk Bola Minayin, Talmud Lomer Kadoshim Yu Chalu. We have another source which tells us that Yotzuk Bola, these two parts of the avoda, are uh, um, that if you do them outside of the mikdash, you are chayav. So you're chayav something. So midrabanan crosswalk of the alma. No, those things could be just the drabanan, and yeah, we have a pasuk, but sometimes the pasuk is just to kind of support. It's not explicit in the pasuk. It's just supporting what the rabbis quoted to support their rabbinic rule. Meisvei, so they asked about Rav Sheshes again, Veilhen Misa Tamishishimesh. There's another branch that says that what's subject to the death penalty? A person who a Kohen who is Tameh who did the avodah. So doesn't that contradict directly Rav Sheshes? Or is this Tufta? Yes, it does. Okay, so that's Rav Sheshes was wrong, in other words. Okay. Now we're going to analyze that whole brisa. All of those things in that brisa that we said were were your chayv misa for. Goof.
Well, wasn't that the whole discussion? Whether now it says to tell me shemesh tiyufta. The Mishnah was saying it, and Reb Sheshes objecting. We brought all these issues, and now to say tiyufta, we're saying, what are we saying to tiyufta? On
Rav Sheshes, on the statement of Rav Sheshes, right? Rav Sheshes says, they asked him, "Kohen sheshimesh betuma, is he chayv misi b'dei shemayim or not?" And he said, "No, he's not chayav." But this brisa says tamish sheshimesh. It goes on to say, "Elohein shav misa tamish sheshimesh." That you do get misi b'dei shemayim, so it's directly opposed to Rosh Hashanah.
Well, that was the Mishnah in the beginning. So, and then we had all these proofs. So, I mean, what else do we add?
So why do we go? Why do we go through that whole rigmarole when we had a brisa? That's a great question. I don't know. I think the Gemara enjoys like teasing out all the possible sources and trying to reconcile them, and then finally it comes to the one that it can't reconcile and says, "Okay, so Rav Sheshes was wrong." But it's a good question. Like, we'll just start with that one and save us the trouble, right?
Well, that was the Mishnah, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. No, that's a brisa.
Oh, okay. Okay. Elohim.
It's another source. Basically, we find another source that finally refutes Rav Sheshes, and we have no way to reconcile that with Rav Sheshes. So we say, okay, this brisa was against Rav Sheshes, so Rav Sheshes must have been wrong.
But the last thing was that we quoted was an asmachta from the
Yeah,
Rabbanan.
we said we could reconcile that by saying, oh, that brisa is just an asmachta, but this one is not an asmachta. It states directly, Elohim Shabamisa, Tamishashimesh.
And wasn't that the original brisa?
No, different one. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, different brisa.
this was the one about the list of all
Okay.
these things here, right?
Um,
Of all the what do you call the Yotze of Abolev, Apotech, a Moleach. So
so what's your question?
so I mean, so what was the final nail in the wood here? The
Is
final point that
this Bryce, which I think is a different Bryce, which says Elohim Shabamisa, for whether you have Misa B'dei Shamayim, Tamei Sheshimesh. One of the examples is Tamei Sheshimesh, a Kohen who was Tamei that did the avoda, which is exactly the question that Rav Sheshes was dealing with. Rav Sheshes said, "No, you're not Chayav Misa B'dei Shamayim," but this apparently he was unaware of this Bryce.
and the bright. What is the bright? Is the bright the one which mentions a Bolel?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a separate one.
That was it. The bright that's this last bright. Ela Shemamita. Tell me, that's the whole brisa. Is that it?
No, I think it's an excerpt from a brisa, but this is the relevant part that's being quoted. I mean,
Oh,
sometimes it's confusing because we don't know exactly like what, if you have a Mishnah, you can say, where is the Mishnah quoted? All right. But the Brisa, you don't have that.
so for our purposes, the whole bright is this Ve'elohim Shemamita. Tell me
You're right. For our
Shoshimesh.
purposes, right.
That's it. He brings this. That's it.
Yeah, that's the only
Okay.
part that's relevant because that's what we're discussing, or the statement of Rosh Hashanah was specifically about Tamei Sheshimesh. So we'll excerpt from this brisa the part that talks about Tamei Sheshimesh, and it says Elohim Misa. That's one of the things for which you have Misa B'dei Shalayim.
All the rest of this stuff with the mixing, the oil pouring, that's not part of that's something else.
I believe so. Yes.
That's why it's rather strange because we had the original bright which said that they were the type.
Right.
Now he brings
Exactly.
this it's 3 words and that's the Bryson to prove it. We had said this
Exactly. Like
before.
why did you go through the whole discussion, as I said before, right? But the Gemara often does that, right? It goes through uh all the possible brises that might have some bearing on it. It reconciles them and then it says, oh, but here's one you can't reconcile. You could have started with that and saved us the trouble, if you will, right? But that's not the Gemara's style.
It just seems that it seems a little strange here that you bring 3 words out of nowhere. Then that's the yufta.
Yeah, that's true. Like often the Gemara will quote an entire brisa and say, and this is the part, and that's actually what we're going to do now is go back to the brisa that we saw a few minutes ago. So let's do that.
All right.
Gufa, Elishav Misa, the brisa that we quoted at length said, this is, it could be, I could be mistaken. It could be quoting the same brisa. But so I'm not clear. But anyway, we're going to analyze that whole brisa piece by piece. So Tevel, no, no, I'm sorry. Now the Gemara is going to discuss the whole brisa from which it excerpted those 3 words.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Gufa. This is the brisa. Elishav misa. These are the things for which you get misa b'dei shemayim. Ha'ochel so tevel. Someone who eats tevel, which is produce where truma has not been taken yet. Kohen tamei shachal truma tahora. A kohen who is tamei, a kohen can eat truma, but he can't eat it while he's tamei. If he eats it when he's tamei, he's misa b'dei shemayim. Zar shachal so truma, a non-kohen who eats truma. Zar sheshimesh, a non-kohen who does the avoda. In the mikdash, tamei sheshimesh, a kohen who can do the avoda, but he's tamei, so he can't. So that's misa b'dei shamayim. Tzvul yom sheshimesh, someone who is tamei, he's already passed, gone through the time period which is required to become tahar, but he still needs to wait till the end of the day and go to the mikvah. So he's still considered tamei, so he gets misa b'dei shamayim if he does the avoda. Umachusar begadim, if he doesn't have all the appropriate bigdei kahuna, clothing on. Umachusar kapara, or a person who is tame and has waited the appropriate time, but is still required to bring a carbon before his tuma is complete. So he can't do the avoda either, and if he does, he gets misa b'nei shemayim. V'shelo rachat yadayim raglayim, or someone who did the avoda without first washing his hands and feet, which is a requirement. Ushsuyayin, or he does the avoda when he's drunk. Ufruei rosh, or he does it with long hair. Those are all chayv misa b'nei shemayim. Aval, however, Arel, someone who does the avoda while uncircumcised. The onen, or he does it while he's in the status of an onen. In other words, one of his primary relatives has just died and not buried yet. The yoshev, or he's doing it while sitting. Now, those are all things that you're not supposed to do, but that doesn't get misa b'nei shemayim. That just is a lotase. Like, you shouldn't do it, right? You could get, I guess, you get malchus. Balmum, what about a Kohen who has a disqualifying physical disfigurement of some kind? So Rabbi says that's misa b'nei shemayim. The rabbis say no, just allow. Hazid b'meila. If you do meila on purpose, meila is when you misappropriate property of the mikdash. Rabbi Amar b'Misa. Again, Rabbi says death penalty, misa b'nei shemayim, and the rabbis say no, it's just allowed. Okay, now we're going to examine each one of these things. That'll take up the rest of the day and some tomorrow. And these are all things which the Bryce is saying you get misa b'nei shemayim. One who eats truma, or sorry, produce from which truma has not been separated. What's the source that you get misa b'nei shemayim? Shmuel said, so where do you get this idea from? The misa b'nei shemayim. Deceive v'lo yichalus kasher b'nei Yisrael es asher yarimu l'Hashem. And when it's talking about truma, it says, and they shouldn't profane the sanctified things of the people which they bring to God. Yarimu truma. It's referring to truma. Basidim litrama chasum medaber. Talking about not profaning things from which truma will be taken. In other words, truma hasn't been taken yet, and it says. Okay, and it uses the word v'lo yichalalu, right? V'yolif chilu mitruma. And we do a xerashav of the word chilul, of the root chilul, v'lo yichalalu. We compare that to, sorry, we compare that to eating truma, other things with truma. In other words, you can't eat truma if you're not a kohen. Malahalan b'misa, just as regular case of truma is subject to misa b'nei shemayim, avkan b'misa. And that pasuk, by the way, is umesuvo ki yachalaluhu, talking about a kohen who's tameh who eats truma. Mesuvo ki yachalaluhu, that they'll die because they have made it halal. They've profaned it. So we can apply that to, because we also uses the word halal, we apply it to our case of someone who eats produce from which there is no truma taken yet. The Gemara says, wait, so you want to say it's because of the use of the word halal in both places? You're going to apply the case of halal of eating truma betuma. That's a death penalty, so you're going to apply that to eating tavel. But you could, there are other cases of the word halal. How about taking the word chilul from the case of nosa, right? If any carbon has a specified time period during which you can eat it, right? And if you eat it beyond that time period, that's called nosar. And malahal and bakaris afkam karis. Someone who eats nosar, we know, is subject to karis. It's explicit in the Torah, and it says about that. It uses the word. What's the pasuk there? Kias kodesh Hashem chilel. Yes, Kodesh Hashem Chilel. So uses the word by nosar, uses the word halal also. So why don't you apply the punishment from that, from nosar, which is kares? Why don't you apply that to tavel? So the Gemara says, well, misaber mitruma lemelach. If you're going to choose one over the other, we'll choose truma to apply the punishment to shekain, because there's many ways in which it is similar. In other words, the case of Tavel is similar to the case of Truma Batuma. What are those ways? Chutzel, Truma, Chutzel Aretz, it doesn't apply outside of Israel. Putra, and there's a way to get around it. In other words, you can either make the Truma Tame, or you can give from the temple, you can give Truma. So there's a way to make it mutar, which is not the case of nosar. Once something is nosar, you're done. There's no way to make it mutar. Barabim also uses the word chilul in the plural form, as opposed to nosar, where it says chilel, it's in singular. So it's more similar. Peros, and also truma. The two cases of truma have to do with produce, not meat, and nosar is meat. Pigul v'nosar. And there's no with nosar, it's a carbon, so you have the pigul applies to it, and nosar applies to it, whereas truma, there's no such thing, right? So basically, it's much more logical to apply the lesson from truma tamea to teva. Okay, so versus adrabah, well, maybe
So
the other
both
way around. I mean,
cases, the punishment is bidei shemayim, isn't it?
yes, right. But both cases, yes, both cases they're bidei shemayim. What's the difference between kares and misa bidei shemayim? So it's a little unclear, actually. It's a good question. As far as I could tell, the real difference is that kares is considered more severe. Also, there's some indication that kares might apply somehow to future generations in some way. It's a little unclear to me what the real difference is, but definitely kares is considered more severe than
But
misa
it's
b'dei
still,
shemayim.
but it is bidei shemayim, isn't it? Correct.
Oh yeah, both are b'dei shemayim, right? But as a technical term, something for which you're chayiv kares is worse in some way than something for which you're chayiv misa b'dei shemayim.
Although,
Okay, so
so
I don't
Tony,
really have a satisfactory answer exactly what's the difference between them, but the Gemara definitely considers them, different in some way, even though
so
the basic result seems to be kind of the same.
so karet is a form of bidei shemayim, or it's a subset, or it's a
It's hard to know how to categorize them.
there's a generic form, there's a specific form, or there.
Caries is worse in some way. It might, as I said, it might just be considered a worse offense, even though the punishment is the same. I think there also is some indication where caries might apply to future generations or something. That's a little unclear to me.
Mm.
Anyway, so we've said that the Gezerah Shavi you should apply is from Truma Tmeya to Tevel rather than from Nosar to Tevel. So if there's other rabbi, maybe other way around. I mean, Nosar have maybe it's more logical to apply the Gezerah Shavi from Nosar to Truma to Tevel. Why Shekain? Psul ochel ein lo heter b'mikvah, because psul ochel, because it has to do with food, like food that's disqualified, right? Tevel and nosar is the food itself is forbidden, whereas a kohen who is tame eating truma, there's nothing wrong with the truma, right? The truma itself is fine. It's the status of the person that's the problem. Whereas with tevel and nosar, it's the status of the food itself. So that makes more sense that those are more similar. And ein lo heter b'mikvah. And also, neither if the prohibition has to do with tuma, you can solve that, right? You can go to the mikvah, right? There's a procedure for getting out of tuma, but there's no procedure for with a mikvah to get out of nosar, and a mikvah will not help you with tevel. So maybe tevel and nosar are more the same. So it's not efficient. Okay, so you've got 7 versus 2, right? We put it 7 thing in which tevel is more similar to truma batuma. Okal truma, a tame person eating truma, and you only have 2 in which tevel and nosar are the same. So which one are you going to go with? You're going to go with the 7. Or Ravina Amar, Ravina says it's not a question of the number of ways they're similar, but chilul derabim, mechilul derabim adif. No, the thing that's dispositive is the word itself, right? I mean, the whole point of Gzeira Shava is you have a similar word. So if you have if you're going to compare a plural word, you compare it to another plural word, not to a singular word. So therefore, nosar, which is written in the singular, is not the one that we're going to learn. Okay. Next thing in the brisa, uh, for whether you chayav misavi l'shamayim, kohen tam shachol truma tahara, a tame kohen who eats regular truma. Mina, where do you get that from? De'amar Shmuel, minayin lekohen tame shachol truma tahara. Shehu b'misavi l'shamayim. Shmuel says, where do you get that from? Desiv v'shamros mishmarti v'lo yisu alav peit v'mesu vo ki yichaluluhu. It's pretty much explicit, right? Like keep my mishmeres, guard the truma, don't sin with it, because if you do, you're going to die. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. But tahora in, all right, so that applies to a tame kohen who eats regular truma, right? But tamei lo, but a tame kohen who eats truma that's tame, you would not get misa b'dei shemayim. Diamar Shmuel Elazar. Minayin l'kohen tamei shachol truma tmeish ena b'misa. Where do you get that from? But there's no misa b'dei shemayim for a tamei kohen eating a tamei trumash. And Amar, he says, "Umesu bo tichalu." You'll die because you have profaned the truma. This truma is already profaned in the sense it's already tamei, so it's not so bad for a tamei kohen to eat it. That's not considered actively chilul. The chilul has already taken place because the truma became tamei, so you're not going to get misa b'dei shemayim.
So can a zar eat that Talmud Truma?
Great question. Next thing in the brisa, zar shachol truma. A non-kohen eats truma. Oh wait, you're talking about truma tmeya.
Right.
Can a zar eat truma tmeya? So no, but presumably the same would apply. It's not misa b'dei shemayim because it's already tamei. Okay, but what about zar shachol truma?
So what is it? Is there a punishment for him then?
So when it says ba'azhara, usually it means it's a lav, and I assume you would get malchus for it. Okay, zar shachol truma. What about a non-kohen who eats regular truma? Amarav. Zar shachol truma loke. So the brisa says misa b'dei shemayim, but Rav says it's only malchus. Right? Amar Rav Kana Rav Asi Rav. So they said to him, Lemamar b'misa. Why don't you say it's misa b'dei shemayim? Just b'chol zar le'yochal kadosh. Like our brisa seems to rely on that the pasuk that any zar, any non-kohen can't eat kodesh. So here you have to see the whole pasuk in Vayikra. So it's the Shamros Mishmarti, as we quoted before. They should guard my mishmeres, so what I've told them to guard, and not sin with it. Umesubo kichalu, because they will die if they profane it. Ani Hashem Hashem, I am God who makes them holy. The Chazar le'ochal kodesh, and then it says, and a non-kohen can't eat truma, can't eat kodesh. So wouldn't you say the same penalty applies, right? Misa b'dei shemayim, right? Like it says, don't profane the truma or you'll die, and a non-kohen shouldn't eat it. It should also the same death penalty should apply. So the answer is no. There is a like we've already finished when it says that's kind of period, right? Full stop. Like here's the Misa b'dei shemayim is for umesavo ki chalulu, right? Not to eat a betuma. Full stop. And we have another prohibition, v'chol zar le'yochal kodesh, but that doesn't mean that it's part of the umesuba. It doesn't the umesuba comes? It was written about the previous thing, and this is a separate thing that you can't do. So they asked, but don't we have a brisa that a zar that eats truma does get misa b'dei shemayim? Doesn't that contradict Rav? So branches masisa Rav Karamis. You're asking from a Mishnah to Rav. Rav Tana, Rav can be considered a Tana. So Rav is an Amara, but he's a first generation Amara. And sometimes the Gemara says, yeah, so Rav disagrees with the Mishnah. He has the status. He's close enough to the Tanaim, to the generation of Tanaim, that he can be considered a Tana. So yes, this Mishnah contradicts Rav, but so fine. So Rav had a different opinion.
What's the maskana here? That Zar.
No, so there's a machlokas. So Rav says it's there's no misvidei shemayim, and the brisa that we're dealing with says there is a misvidei shemayim. So what's the answer? I don't know. It's not resolved. It's a machlokas.
According to Rav, then it would seem that almost a kal vachomer that if a Zar does not get mita b'dei shemayim for eating truma, then if he ate tamei truma, he certainly wouldn't get bidei shemayim.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Okay, that could be. Gemara doesn't discuss that, but it's a reasonable inference. Okay, moving on in the Brisa. Zar Shashimesh, a non-Kohen who did the avoda. There's Misa B'nai Shemayim Dichsiv, Hazar Korev, you must. It's pretty explicit. The Tame Shishimesh, what about the Tame Kohen who does the Avoda? Kedabamine, where we get, what's the source that there's Nisi B'nai Shemayim? Kedabamine, Rav Kia bar Avim Rav Yosef. After Rav Kia asked Rav Yosef, Minayin L'Tame Shishimesh Ub Misa. Where do you get this from? That a Tame Kohen who did the Avoda gets Misa B'nai Shemayim. See, here's the source. Daber al Aaron Ve'al Balav Bin Nazrumi Kodshe B'nai Yisrael V'lo Yichalu Hashem Kodshi. Uh, to speak to Aaron and the sons, the Kohanim, they should separate themselves from the Kodshim and not profane my name, right? So again, you have the word lo yichalu. They shouldn't make this halal. As we did before, we're going to apply what we know about truma, for which it also says v'lo yichalu, which is Misa B'nai Shemayim. We're going to apply that to Tamei Shashimesh. Malan Misaf Kam Misa, just as Truma, just as eating Truma Batuma is subject to Misa B'nai Shemayim, so too doing the Avoda Batuma. So now we're going to go over this again. Like, well, there's another place where it says chilul and nosar, and nosar is kares, malin kares, avkan kares. Maybe you should say that a zar, that a Kohen who is tamei that does the avoda, maybe he should get kares. And the sum of the truma avakol leila melech. No, we're going to learn it from truma. It makes more sense. Shekain, goof, tamei, mikvah, barabi, and as we saw before, there are these similarities. It's the person himself. It has to do with tuma, which no sir has nothing to do with tuma. Mikvah, there is a way to use a mikvah to get around the problem, or to solve the problem, which is not the case with nosar. But Rabim, and also you have the plural use of the word, which is not the case with nosar. It uses the word hillel in singular. Whereas Rabim nosar v'lamela shekain kodesh panim pigul v'nosar. Oh, wait a minute. Here we have four ways in which nosar is more similar. Kodesh, it deals with kachim. Panim, it's something that happens. It's something that has to do with inside the mikdash, right? The avoda and nosar are both inside the mikdash, and pigul benosar, and also subject to pigul. So it's more similar. In this case, it's avoda, so it's more similar to nosar and less similar to trumas. Whereas just it's like the second answer we had before. Since we're talking about Xera Shava, we're looking for very similar linguistic formulations. And so Hilul Yichaluhu, which is in the plural, we're gonna and both Truma Batuma and Avoda Batuma, the word Pilul is in plural. We're going to compare those rather than Nosar, in which the word Pilul is in the singular. Okay, next piece of the brisa, Tvul Yom Shashimesh, somebody who is finished with the time period to become tahor, but he's still waiting for the sun to set, and he has to go to the mikvah, so he's still tameh. So that's also Misi B'nai Shemayim. You know, and where do you get that from? The Tanya. We have a brisa. Rabbi Shimon Yomer. Ramez L'Tvul Yom Shem Avav Tfilu El Minayim. Where do we have this from? That Tvul Yom is chilul, is profaning something. Lower Kedoshim Yiyu Leloheim V'Lo Yichalu. They should be holy to their God and not profane it. And so that is written about what? About a Kohen not is not allowed to become Tame. But um, we are im eno inyan latame sheshimesh. If we're not that now, the Gemara is going to claim that that pasuk is actually it's in the context. It's written in the context of a Kohen Tame who did the avoda, but we already know that, right? So nafkalon mi vi nazru. It already says vi nazru mikach b'nei Yisrael, and we understood that to mean Kohen Tameh Shashimesh, right? So when is this written for? It's now in Yom Shashimesh. So we're going to apply this to a different case. And what are we going to apply it to? Tvul Yom. So you're not fully Tameh. You've finished the time period which is required to become Tahar, but you haven't been to the mikveh yet. The olive chilul truma, and then we can say, chilul. So now we've applied chilul to the tuliyot sheshimesh, and that will compare it to truma. Just as the word chilul is used, truma, but even truma, the truma. So we're going to apply the same misagini shemayim to tuliyom sheshimesh. The next thing that we said is Chaimisi Shemaim is a Kohen who isn't wearing the full full set of begadim of clothes. Minalan, what's the source for this? That you get Misi Shemaim? Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Avo says Umatamo Mishmeid Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, or some say it was quoted from Rabbi Lazar. Machagarto Sam Avneit. When the So this is in the Miluim, right? Where the Torah tells Hashem tells Moshe in the Torah, like put on their clothes, and then they become kohanim. The full pasuk is v'chagarto samagnet aron ganav v'chavashto lahem migbaos v'aisalem kuhuna l'chukason, and then they become kohanim when you put on their clothes. Kisman should be dem aleim kunasim aleim. So we get from that what makes somebody a kohen with regard to the avoda, they have to be wearing the clothes. Otherwise, they're not considered valid kohanim for the avoda. And bigdei alayim and kunas alayim. We were derived from this that if they're not wearing the appropriate clothing, they're not considered kohanim to do the avoda, the amar, and we know about the havuzarim. So they're like non-kohanim, amar. So misa. We already saw that a non-kohen who does the avoda gets misugedei shemayim. Kapara. What about similar to Yom? There's some cases of Tuma where you have to wait the appropriate time and bring the carbon. So if you haven't brought the carbon yet, you can't do the avoda. What if you do? So our brisa says, what's the source? Amarav, Amarav Huna, Yamakra, V'chiper Alamakoin V'tahera. The Kohen does kapara, and this is a classic example of Mukusar Kapara is a woman who gives birth, and she's tame for a certain amount of time, and then she has to bring a carbon. And it says the Kohen Tahera. The Kohen does her kapara, brings her sacrifice, but Tahera, and then she becomes Tahara. Tahera miklashi tmeya. So in other words, like until he brings the carbon, she's still considered tame, and we apply that to all cases of Mukusar Kapara. So she's considered tame, then then we already saw that a Tame Kohen that does the avodah gets Misvidei Shema.
But
Okay.
she's Tamei here.
I'm sorry?
She's Tamei, right?
Right. So, but we're applying that to any case of Mechusar Kapara. There are a lot of, there's like Mitzorah, for example, where you have to bring a carbon at the end, right? So we're saying that the example of the pregnant woman, or the postnatal woman, not being it's only once she brings her carbon that she becomes tame. We apply that to anybody who requires a carbon to become tame. Until that person brings such a person brings the carbon, they're still tame. So we'll apply that also to a kohen who is tame and needs to bring a carbon. So, for example, if he's a mitzvah.
Is there a case
that
where
until the carbon is brought, the person is considered tame, even though they've waited the appropriate amount of time.
that's the case of a mitzvah? Is there a case
No,
of
that's it. Yeah,
for example, but is
Yeah.
there a case of a kohen who's, let's say, not a mitzvah, that he doesn't do what he's supposed to do it, and he requires he's mechusa kapara. He requires to bring a korban. For
I
something.
think it only has to do with tuma. I can't think of any other case.
So okay, so he would be Talmud. Okay, he would be Talmud for some other reason. For
Yeah,
some reason, he's Talmud.
for some reason he's tamei, and the type of tuma he has requires a carbon. So until he brings that carbon, he's still considered tamei,
Right.
no matter
That's
how much time has passed.
right. That's
Okay. Next thing, shalom rachas yadayim v'raglayim. I think the last one. No, not the last one. If you didn't wash your hands and feet, which is a requirement before you do the avodah, then you get misubidei shemaim. You know, and where's that from? Deceive. There's explicit pasuk. B'voam alol moed yirchatzu mayim v'lo yamusu. When they come to the mikdash, they have to wash so that they don't die. So, in other words, the consequence of doing it without washing is death. Usually, yain. What about doing the avodah while drunk? You'll see yain v'shechar teish. So this is in the aftermath of the death of Nadav and Abihu. The first thing that Hashem tells Aaron is, don't go into the mikdash drunk. So the implication is, and this is one of the interpretations of why Nadav and Abihu were killed, were suffered misa b'dei shemayim. The implication is because they were drunk. So that teaches us that there is misa b'dei shemayim for those who do the avodah with drunk. Before Rosh, what about long
Eish
hair?
Zar.
I'm sorry?
They brought Eish Zar, Eish into the mikveh. And not clear what it is. That's one interpretation.
That's right. It is one interpretation, but the Gemara is going with that one to determine that that's why they got misa b'dei shemayim. Before Rosh, if you haven't cut your hair, where's that come from? Dixiv Rosh Galechu Ufero Lo Yishalechu. This is the pasuk from Yecheskel. It says like the Kohanim have to, they shouldn't do the avoda when they have not had haircuts. Uksiv Basrei V'yayin Lo Yishtu, and one of the other things that Yecheskel says is forbidden to do the avoda when drunk or after drinking wine. And we already know that drinking wine is a misi b'nei shamayim issue for doing the avoda. So so we're going to apply that also to not having your haircut. Nashiyam b'misa, after rosh b'misa, just as one is subject to death penalty, so is the other. Okay. Now okay, so those are all the things for which you do get Misa B'nai Shemayim, and the rest of this sugya will be regarding the three things that the Brisa said you don't get Misa B'nai Shemayim, which is Arel, Onan, and what was the third one? I forget. And Balmud. So that will pick up, David will pick up tomorrow.
Onain was explicitly different in the case of Aaron, and when we mentioned not of Avihu, right? That Aaron,
Yeah.
God said to Aaron, in this case, you have to bring the carbon. Very in a specific case that even though he wasn't Onain, God said no, you should still bring the carbon.
Still do it. Yeah. So so the Gemara will deal tomorrow with where do we get that from, that in general that you can't do it. Or you definitely can't do it, but that it's not subject to Misa B'nai Shemayim. Okay, have a good day.
Okay. Bye now.